Rewire. Welcome to Rewire, the podcast where trailblazers in tech share their remarkable journeys to the top. I'm June Sarpong, your host, and each week I'll be sitting down with incredible founders, industry game changers, and executives to understand how we can rewire our mindsets and the industry as a whole to shape a brighter future for everyone. I want to find out more about the people who really have your back in a crisis and the power of embracing new perspectives. Rewire. This week, we're about to hear a very open conversation with an angel investor, best-selling author, all-round tech icon. Of course, it is the one and only Rika Nakazawa. Now, Rika, we are going to talk about your origin story because you have such a fantastic journey in terms of moving from Japan to the US and then really becoming a woman at the top of your industry. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you, June. I am well. I know it's been a long week for many of us already, but every day I get more and more excited as other people start to come into the space of areas that I'm focusing. So yeah, very thrilled and very privileged to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Well, I'd love, as is always the case, to start at the beginning because you've had such a phenomenal journey in terms of where you started and who you've become and everything that you've done. So can you describe your moment of becoming?
I think when you said origin story, I have to admit that it's one of these things where I haven't even really gotten started yet.
No, I love
so
that.
It's still,
yeah, there's so much more to do.
The origin part is still happening. And, I gave this talk many, many years ago when I was in the lean and agile space, where I feel like what happened with software development, application development, particularly when I was at Nvidia in the games industry at that time, we were moving from gold mastering games and gold mastering content to now doing things as a service, games as a service. And I gave this an analogy and this metaphor that's basically how we have evolved in terms of how we live our lives. It used to be that you get good grades, go to a good school, graduate, get a good job, then you spend 40 years at the company.
Climbing the ladder.
Yeah, climbing the ladder, and then you get the gold watch, and then you die, right? Now it's more like we are like software. It's life as a service where you're constantly evolving, or at least I try to constantly evolve and have this agile approach to how I build, measure, learn myself. So I haven't and not to counter you, June, just to say that I don't feel like I've become. It's a constant journey and a constant journey of growth, learning, and also tuning into different stations on your radio.
Yeah, I get it. Yes. And then with each step is finding a new area of passion and a new area of your abilities as well in terms of your capacity to be a leader, I presume.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I think I've been very fortunate. And I do think that how we go into our lives and into these moments is going to be a convergence of timing, luck, and chutzpah, or, the grit, which is one of my favorite words. I love the combination of grit and grace. Actually, I think those two go really well together, kind of like salt and pepper. But for me, I was lucky just having been born. So if there's one part of an origin in the making story I would share is that I'm a product of a German woman and a Japanese father.
How do you think those two cultures have shaped your outlook on life?
Well, I think I've been in emerging technology my entire career, and that's been a matter of, again, some luck. So I started my career in the early days of the internet, so now I'm definitely dating myself. But I decided when I was graduating from college that I wanted to get into something that was Japan Western business. So Sony had just bought Columbia TriStar, and it was a huge debacle. And so, and you hear about these stories of visualization. You have your vision board, or you write things down. So I wrote the word Sony down on a piece of paper, and I ended up, complete fluke, getting an internship with a new group within Sony that was called Columbia TriStar Interactive. And it was a rogue group of revolutionaries that were going to bring the miracle of the internet to Sony Pictures television and film properties.
And was this in Japan?
This is in Los Angeles. Yeah. So that started this cycle of going into emerging technologies and figuring out where emerging technologies hits the rubber of that hits the road of commercial application.
Right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning. And I think my upbringing of traversing multiple cultures had something to do with developing the knack or the ability to do pattern recognition. And I think that that's what you have to learn how to do when you are trying to work with different languages and to try to work with different mindsets.
And so what does innovation mean to you? And as somebody that is an innovation officer and is driving change constantly, what does that mean to you, both personally and professionally?
I think it's about ways to solve problems in a way that hasn't happened before. And so as an example, perhaps to bring it back to my experience, and I'm thinking about pursuing a doctorate right now. And so just to explain how that ties back to the ways that I think about innovation is that about 2 years ago, I trademarked the term organic intelligence as a response to artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of code and systems in nature that has billions of years on our mere 10,000 to 100,000 years. So innovation to me is how do you use emerging technologies in a way with what exists today to fundamentally solve a problem that hasn't been, how do you crack a code that hasn't been cracked yet? And so, but I think we also need to be careful. Just innovation is a very sexy word, even if it's overused now. But I think we need to be careful that it's not about constant change or constant disruption, because it becomes to be too much, and sometimes you don't let something see the light of day enough. Right? Where people talk about pivot. It's like, well, maybe you're pivoting too fast.
Yeah. Let's see what this leads to and becomes.
Yeah. And
organically.
Yeah. Exactly. But also, I think it's really important to think about partnerships in innovation, because there is no one cog that makes the machine work. It's a combination of different things. And so I think different mindsets and bringing in different perspectives is really key.
Completely. Now, you've often been one of the very few women in the roles that you've had and the companies that you've been in terms of senior leadership position. What are the issues you've faced, and not just to only focus on gender, but I do think it's important to have these conversations. What are the issues that you faced as a female board member? Because we know still at the top tables, there aren't enough. And so when you're in those positions, does your gender play a role in how the perspective you have in terms of what a company needs to deliver?
Well, gender plays a role insofar it's about representation.
Of course.
So I think about that, which is around gender playing a role insofar as being able to be an advocate or voice for something or an experience that's not represented in the room. And so, but going back to your question on challenges, I think it's really important for us to remember to be driven by a vision and a mission. People looking for blame or looking for ways to be like, well, it has to be a matter of color or gender. Because, for example, my partner in my life served in the military, and he always said, in the theater, the theater of war and military, when you're driven by a mission or a vision, it doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. Everybody is striving towards the same goal and mission. And so, and the reason why I bring that up specifically in this context is because I also know that it's been very challenging for women in particular to seek support from other women that have advanced. And there's a famous phrase that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women.
Madeleine Albright.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is that if we can rally leaders to be focused on a goal of collective state of thriving versus competing per se. And so it does worry me a bit in the current climate that we're living in, that there seems to be this fostering of an animosity of other versus no matter what it is, right? So I think that I try to focus on that around mission and purpose-driven outcomes.
Which then overrides and supersedes everything else.
Yeah, should, I think.
Should. So we have a clip that I'd love to get your opinion on. It's by INSEAD's Anna Aris on how boards work. So can we take a listen?
Yeah, absolutely.
They change the rules of the game. If you are in a board, normally in a board you tend to have a lot of alpha male, because otherwise you wouldn't end up in the board. And then there's specific rules of how you interact and how you play with each other. And so you don't ask too many questions. You tend to be very much aligned around things. And sometimes the hunting spirit takes over.
So what are your thoughts on what she had to say on that? In terms of the sort of dominant personality type that tends to be on a board, and how that, I suppose, would make it harder for those that aren't that sort of alpha personality type.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization and the culture of the organization. I also think that I wrote a book about women on boards and
I
their
was about
experience.
to ask,
to a
Dear
number of-
Chairwoman.
Correct.
Yeah, what a great title for a book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I love that. So please, tell
Yeah,
us
so
more.
within the context of writing Dear Chairwoman, where I interviewed board leaders about their journey to the boardroom, many women before you even get to the boardroom, many of us have experienced that moment in a meeting where we're discussing something. And you don't have to have been the only woman in the room. There might be a good balance in there, but you say something. And then the meeting moves on. And about 10 minutes later, a guy will say the same thing.
Exactly the same thing.
And then all of a sudden, it's the like most brilliant aha moment. The skies parted and lightning came down and everybody was illuminated. And I think that speaks a little bit to that clip that we just listened to, which is even when you do engage, what happens when the perception and the unconscious bias takes over. I was in a talk in Japan 2 weeks ago, and I was asked a question, what particular challenges might women have in leadership? And I said, well, kids, whether you're male, female, or somewhere in between or other, we're all inculcated to not make mom mad. So when you're in a setting where women get angry or raise their voice, it's this kind of innate reaction where you're
to being a
potentially
kid.
right.
Okay.
So because there's a different response to women when they raise their voice and get angry in a meeting. To a man,
which is expected from a man.
In many ways, correct.
Right.
We see a lot of exhibition of this kind of behavior that is
whereas a woman is seen as hysterical or whatever. It's not respected in the same way when the same emotion is expressed.
Right. So I think the way that we get past that, going back to the clip, is really being an alpha response in a way that's informed. So it's not coming from a place of anger. It's coming from a place of indignation because it's just wrong or it's ill-informed. So you come, and the good news is when I was writing the book, a number of women board leaders that I talked to were talking about how surprised they were at how well prepared they were going into a board meeting.
In comparison.
In some of the stories. But again, June, I want to be careful because I really think it depends.
Yeah, of course.
I think it really depends.
Does, yeah. And also things are changing too.
Yes.
So I'd love to get your thoughts on the pushback against DEI and the number of companies now retreating from their positions around inclusion and what you think that is.
What it is a response to, I think, instances of where the over-indexing has threatened power structures in a way that can be understood as discriminatory the other way.
Right.
So one of the things that I really love about what Ayumi Aoki-Moore is doing with women in tech, for example, is when she hosts the global summits or her forums, she really tries to bring our allies. And I think that's really important and critical. But if you take a woman that grows up in Connecticut and goes to private school, say, Exeter or one of these other ones, goes to Yale, gets a law degree, and she graduates and enters a prestigious law firm, she's going to be less diverse with her male colleague that followed the same footsteps as a Caucasian male that grows up in the backwaters of Mississippi who happens to clerk or work part-time in a law firm, gets inspired, runs double shifts as a janitor to go to law school at night, gets a degree, and goes in and wins a momentous precedent-setting law case, right? So he's going to be more diverse in a room than the woman is.
Okay, I get you. Where we're not factoring background as well.
Right, but that's where AI can come in and help. I think that, I do think that Gen AI, I know there's a lot of concern around bias in AI, but I think AI is going to help us really be able to parse through and really be able to bring that refraction of experiences into that. So, and just to go back, because I do want to answer the question of what's my response to the pushback on DE&I. I think the pushback is unfortunate. And I think it is also telling us how we need to pivot in terms of our approach.
I agree.
Because we still need to, because it's not a meritocracy.
No, it's not.
It's not a meritocracy.
No,
if we wanted to go, bring it. Let's do meritocracy.
Yeah, let's see.
Let's do meritocracy, because if we were truly to do meritocracy,
the results
there would be more diversity in leadership and in these forums. So, but until we get to that point of really being able to have AI or in other emerging technologies help us with that meritocracy, I think we just have to figure out how we do like an Aikido move, right? Where we take the energy of the pushback and use it in a way that's going to feed and reinforce the outcomes and the impacts that we need to achieve.
I agree. And bring everyone with us along the journey, even those that were the beneficiaries of the old way of doing things. So there isn't the same fear.
And that's why with the Global Summit that NTT is partnering with Women in Tech at the Osaka World Expo, where we're going to have a pavilion.
Can we talk about that, please?
Yes, I'd love to talk about
segue.
that. Yes.
Tell me more. Because that was announced here.
Yes. So we
at MWC, we're here in Barcelona, by the way, which is where we're doing this interview.
Yes. So very excited. NTT was always going to have a pavilion at the World Expo. And the World Expo happens every 5 years. And we are wedged between, when I say we, I mean Japan, because I am Japanese. We're wedged between Dubai and Riyadh, which is where 2030 World Expo will be. And I think that the World Expo has become a platform where countries can showcase their innovation, along with some other private companies, including NTT. And so Women in Tech has 250,000 members. They're in over 57, 58 countries now.
Isn't that brilliant?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And they're on a mission to empower 5 million women and girls by the year 2030 with STEM education. And the point is, and what we said in Davos, on the stage in Davos at the World Economic Forum, is this is a matter of economic development and prosperity. Because the fastest way that we're going to get more people into STEM and fuel this massive paradigm shift that we're expecting around AI and technology and skills and all that is to get more girls and women in.
And educate anyone who's capable of doing that work.
Correct. And so the Global Summit is really going to focus on key areas of tech diplomacy, of AI. And the other thing about Women in Tech for the Global Summit I should mention is that it's not just technology companies and leaders. We're talking ministerial leaders. We're talking esteemed academics. We're talking students that are going to be coming in to be inspired because they are going to be the
future.
They're the foundations upon which the future will be built.
And I want to talk quickly, if I may, about your role as Chief Innovation Officer at NTT and the work that you're doing to drive the AI revolution. One, what do you think the sort of exciting opportunities and green shoots are? And then two, what are the things that worry you in this work? Because I can imagine it's such a big responsibility in terms of what this technology is capable of.
Yeah, I don't spend as much time. Well, I work on the relevance of AI within specific modules, as it were, like modalities. And where I'm focusing a lot of my time right now is space and satellite.
Okay.
Which is definitely green shoots, by the way.
Yeah.
And AI has a large role to play in space and satellite because AI is used around orchestration of thousands of satellites, close to almost 10,000 satellites now in LEO orbit. And then there's also going to be a lot of Earth observation applications where we're going to be able to see almost a digital twin of the Earth, and that's a lot of data. And so being able to manage a lot of that data and run the analysis and analytics on it will be a big part of where AI plays in. But more on a professional level as an individual within a large organization. So NTT, June, I don't know if you know, we are 340,000 people around the world.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
So, yes. 340,000. I'm responsible for translating some of the investments that we make in R&D and innovation to our overseas opcos, of which the largest is NTT Data, which we have a booth here at MWC. And so space and satellite, and I know NTT Data is looking a lot at AI. So in our booth here at MWC, for example, we have an agentic AI system that creates an avatar of June through your LinkedIn profile, create an avatar of you, and then it'll match you with created avatars of other people on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Based on who you think you should, and what is MWC if not gazillion connections,
networking, tech networking on the planet.
Yeah. So, I mean, and who knows, maybe there's a love match that comes out of professional match and there's a secondary revenue. So no. But we do a lot of work around AI and how AI and agentic AI is going to help automate a lot of things that frees up people to be able to focus on other things. And then figuring out how we help advance our workforce and upskill them in that regard so that we can take the fear and the uncertainty out of that. I'm super optimistic about where we're going to go because we're just in the beginning. And I know people are concerned about energy and data centers and all this, but we might be putting data centers in space.
Yeah. Yes. Well, with the work that you're doing, it's quite possible.
Yeah.
So you are a trilingual, if I'm right, trilingual leader. So you speak German, English, obviously, and Japanese. What a fantastic trio of languages to speak.
Thank you.
I'm really interested because I'm fascinated in terms of when we're looking at the development of AI, the focus on the English language and the fact that if we're looking at things from a diverse perspective, not enough of AI is in different languages at its source. Is this something that you're focused on at all in ensuring that actually from the outset, it's developed in multiple languages as opposed to being translated from English?
I've always thought about language as software for the human brain because, do you speak another language?
Yes,
what do
I
you
speak Tree, which is my Ghanaian
Treen.
language.
Oh,
yeah.
wow, Treen.
Mm-hmm.
That's hot. So
I'll teach you some after, and you can teach me yours.
I'm sure there's at least a few words in Treen that don't exist in English.
Oh, lots.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of it is contextual, some of it is emotional, some of it is traditional, historical, all of this. So I think about languages as software for how we think. And so and this is why I did try to learn a Python coding language, because to me, it's just another language. And I learned it just so that I could understand what all this coding language was about. I didn't do it enough to be able to be versed in and fluent in write code and create applications. But I may get back to that after my doctorate, right? So I do think it's really important that languages are represented. By the way, the other challenge, the bias that happens with that is that we're talking about written languages. What about the languages that aren't even our oral languages? And a number of them have already died. But what is interesting to me, so I wish I spoke more than 3, by the way. My mother speaks 5 or something. But what happens now is that when I try to switch gears between languages, it just completely creates a huge cloud in my brain and doesn't work very well. So I do think about the relevance of language in terms of enriching the total data set of information from which we're going to define future fill in the blank processes, experiences, innovation, all of that. So Japanese, the interesting thing about so let me tell this fun story. When I was working for Accenture, at one point we had a cultural expert come in because I was part of the marketing team at one point, and it was all international, people from all over the world. And it's this crazy Dutch guy. I'm sorry if you're listening. You're amazing if you know who you are. He said, okay, so who in this room can tell me which brain that if I cracked it open would meaningfully and materially look different from other brains? We're like, and I'm thinking Maori, trying to think of something super exotic. Now I'll think of the Ghanaian tree.
Yeah.
And then he said, the Japanese. And of course, everyone looked at me because I'm the token Japanese in the room. And then he said, you're Japanese? And I said, well, half. And he said, okay, by the way, this doesn't mean that you're smarter. And everybody laughed. And he said, the reason why your brain would look different if we were to look at it right now is because the Japanese language, the written language, is a combination of phonetic and visual language. Because when we write, so anybody that learns Japanese, they know there's 3 alphabets. There's the hiragana alphabet, which is phonetic. Then there's katakana, which is a version of the phonetic, but it's for foreign words and onomatopoeias, like boom and...
Yes.
And then the third one are kanji, of which there's 2,500 kanji that we use in Japanese kind of on a daily basis. So when we learn how to write, we're switching back and forth in the part of our brain between phonetic, what something sounds like, and what something visually represents is, like hieroglyphics.
I get it, yeah.
So my Rika is field and ka is flowers. So my name means field. It's unfortunate because I have hay fever, which means I'm allergic to my name myself. So which is why I could go to China and I could just look at Chinese characters and basically know what it's saying because we share so the reason why I bring this up is because there is an AI company in Japan that's been funded by NTT and others called Sakana AI. And they're thinking about this whole, I know there's a technical term for it in linguistics, but they're examining what is the implication of having language that is representative of images, not phonetic sound of how you sound out a word.
Wow.
And they're thinking about that within the context of AI and language models. So, and I bring this up because I think it's really important. It's very easy to get caught up in the narratives that are dominant in the media. There are ventures and startups and brilliant people, and I'm sure things that are going on in academia that are really thinking about this and really unpacking what the implications and the impact of all of this is going to be. I do think ultimately it is really important for us to somehow capture experiences in if it has to be a different language as close as possible as we can get to it. And this goes back to diversity and inclusion, which is about representation and all that.
100%.
So
and authentically representing the different backgrounds and cultures, etc.
And I think what we will see, I hope what we'll see, and you saw this in some of the sessions where there was a QR code for AI translation, is that translation will get so good because these languages are represented all over so that we can actually start communicating without having to learn other languages. Although the other side of that is that I don't want to discourage people from learning other languages.
Yeah, there's a beauty in learning other languages.
So I'll go back to Python at some point or whatever newfangled languages.
After your doctorate.
After my doctorate.
So I have one last question, Rika, before you leave, which is, what is your advice or your top tip in terms of helping to rewire our mindsets to embrace this new future that's coming?
Yeah, well, that's the name of the podcast, Rewire.
Mm.
I do think that, so neuroplasticity is a treasure. It's a true treasure and it's magical. They did this nun study a number of years ago because there's a certain percentage of women that get Alzheimer's. And it's very personal because my grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And so they did the study where nuns would give up their brain to science after they passed. And it was a longitudinal study over a period of time. And as the nuns passed, and by the way, the nuns in this convent, they were putting them on this learning programs of mental exercise throughout their entire lives, along with the duties
all
that
of
they were
the nuns were on
all of the
stuff.
nuns,
okay.
yeah. And what they found is that when they were looking at the brain, that sure enough, that percent, I forget what the percentage, but the expected percent of the brains that would show that stickiness that happens with Alzheimer's, the plaque that forms that creates Alzheimer's, there's a name for that too. And they found that lo and behold, that certain percentage applied to those brains. But the thing is that none of the nuns exhibited Alzheimer's while they were in the.
So they had, as it were, the symptoms.
They had the physical
markers, but none of the
manifestation.
symptoms.
Correct, but they had none of the symptoms. So they had the
Wow.
physical manifestations, but that was because of neuroplasticity. So
So the brain almost protected itself from all this learning.
Yes.
I get it.
So this is where organic intelligence goes back to rewiring, because it's really marvelous when you think about the ability for our organic systems to be able to rewire itself
and self-correct as well.
So
Brilliant.
I think that the tips that I would say is be open to the other stations on your radio that you haven't discovered yet, to continue pushing, because you might already be super passionate about something. You knew at the age of 12 that you wanted to be a medical doctor, and that's what you've pursued, and you've won accolades and you've saved lives. But maybe there's other stations on your radio that you might want to tap into. And the more magical piece is when you meet somebody, and this goes back to human connection and why that's going to be so critical no matter what, is when you meet somebody that tunes you into a station that you always thought was just white noise.
Yes.
Right? And they tune you into that, and then you listen to that and you think, oh, okay, that's incredible. And so
you've learned something new.
And so that's what I would really encourage, is just to listen to amazing podcasts like Rewire.
Well, of course.
To get different perspectives and to hear June
Darling.
talk to amazing other guests that
like
are
yourself.
and always to know that neuroplasticity means that your brain is always going to be looking for pathways of creation and possibilities, no matter how old you get. And I'm half Japanese, so the chances of me living
to
long,
100,
I'm going for 120. I'm going for 120.
Come on, let's do it. Yeah.
But it's a quality of life as much as it is a quantity of life. And I think having conversations helps rewire things and to encourage those other pathways and other stations to be lit up.
I love that. It has been such a pleasure, Rika. Thank you so much. And huge congratulations on everything you've done and will continue to do in this wonderful passion you have for learning and just getting to new frontiers and pushing yourself, and as a result, pushing us all. So thank you.
Yes. We'll talk when I'm 120 again.
Oh, like I said, I'm here for it.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. Really lovely.
Rewire. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Now, don't forget to subscribe to Rewire so you never miss another episode. And please visit gsma.com for more research, thought leadership, and insights on inclusive leadership. Rewire.